We are making APIs every other day. Mostly the backend developers who are writing APIs in the Nest.js, Express, Kua, Happy.js, in the Node.js backend system. But are we making sure that the APIs which you have deployed to productions, are they production ready? So to understand when your APIs are production ready, first of all, you need to understand the performance metrics. That when the actual users are getting hit on the APIs, are the either the payment APIs or either the some APIs related to adding the items to the shopping cart. What if when the millions of the users are going to access the APIs, and your APIs can be deployed as a Lambda or can be deployed on some container, Kubernetes container or ECS container. So how can you make sure that your APIs are going to perform well? So that is the criteria which we need to always understand before we deploy our application to production. For the first phase, you deploy the app to the productions, but then you should always think about scalability and availability of your application. So using artillery, you can do the performance testing your APIs, and you can make sure that your API is production ready. So it's nothing but a simple YML file you need to write. That okay, what is your target? What are the different phases? And now let's try to understand these phases. Because performance testing is all about when you are running the performance test, you should be able to increase the virtual number of users. And artillery provides the way to increase the number of users per second. So this is the warm-up phase. And what I'm doing is here, this can be your API where you are going to get hit. Okay. So target is your API, and these are the different phases in which you can test. You can increase the number of phases. Warm-up phase. I will be running this phase for the 60-second. Arrival rate is 1. That means every second I will be adding. So this is arrival rate is 1 second and ramp up to 5. So every second I will be adding the 5 users. Right? Here duration is 60 seconds. 60 seconds it will run. Arrival rate is 5 and ramp up to 10. So ramp up means, so arrival rate is every second the one user will get created and it will be ramp up to the 5 users per second. Similarly, the arrival rate is 5. That means 5 users will get created every second, and this will ramp up to 10 users per second. Okay, this is the ramp up load. And spike phase, where you are going to spike up the traffic, right? Duration is 30 seconds. Arrival rate is 10. 10 means every second 10 users are getting added and ramp up to 30 users per second. So these tests where you are creating a virtual user using artillery and hitting your APIs and checking the performance metrics. And these are the plugins which will get reflected in your metrics. And here, these are the URLs I'm going to hit. Okay, you can specify your get, put, post because it supports the end-to-end HTTP REST APIs. So here, these are the threshold: response time P99 and response time P95. So we need to check, okay, how many is the 99% of request is satisfied, took this much millisecond, 95% of the request took this much millisecond. This is the threshold. So this is similarly same talking in the documentation: warm up, ramp up, and the peak phase. These are the plugins, and these are the scenarios which I have defined for my load testing. It will be your own APIs, whatever you wanted to hit. You will put this in the scenarios. And how to run the load test? Similarly, simply artillery you can just install using npx install or npm install minus global artillery run and your spec YML file, and then it will just give you this particular report. You can just generate HTML report out of this JSON report. So let's see this in the action. What I'm doing is I already have one Nest.js app running with the Express. Okay, so this is express.yml I have. And what I'm trying to do, this is very tricky. If you are trying to add a local host, it won't work. So you need to be a little careful when you are running a local test. So I'm going to use my machine, which is good enough to run this test. TLS, I'm not unauthorized because it's a simple localhost URL. This is the local host, port 3010 and the restaurant. And I'm going to hit this particular URL. This is actually search URL which does the lots of database queries and give me the result. Okay, these are the scenarios. And every time when the new virtual user is getting created, it will just log that message. That so we will also know that how many virtual users we are creating, and these are the three phases. Okay, duration 30, ramp up 1 to 5. Warm up phase, duration 30, ramp up from 5 users per second to 10 users per second in 30 seconds. So similarly, 10 users per second to 30 users per second for 60 seconds. This is a spike phase. So we are going to run a simple test to understand the metrics. We can also use the artillery cloud. First we will try to check this metrics offline without using artillery cloud, and then we will publish this report to the artillery cloud also. So this is the simple command which you need to run. Okay, I need a JSON report and I'm hitting express.yml. So I'm using this simple controller, restaurant controller, and I'm hitting this search endpoint to understand the performance, and it is doing this simple query. Okay, I mean it can be any of your API. You don't need to worry about what API I'm testing, because you can test your own Express app, TypeScript, Express TypeScript, or Nest.js app. Here I'm just running the search onto using this controller which is running on 3010, and I used to have the middleware, so I have commented all these things. I'm not passing authorization header. I mock these roles and all, and this is the restaurant controller. Now let's start our test. Artillery run. So this is the test ID. This is, you can see so many virtual users are getting created, and these will ramp up based on the different phases. So this will ramp up to 5 users per second. This will ramp up to 10 users, 30 users per second. So our test got completed, and now we can convert this JSON report into HTML. So the command is simple artillery report express report.json. This will create a HTML report, express report JSON HTML, express report JSON HTML. We will just run it with the live server. So here is our outcome. So how many were frustrated, how many requests were satisfied? Lots of requests were satisfied. Status code 200 for all of them. Failure 0. So here you can see frustrated at time 150 second. These are like 150, and this is the overall statics. So this is one of the analytics. But when I want to compare, like, okay, from my previous result to this result, what I actually do, I mean these are the total, these all are got completed, and here is the performance time also, TCP responses, you can see. So average response time is explained here, 120, 110, 140. Now what I want to do to get a better overview of this analytics report, I can just use artillery cloud that publishes your report and give you the better overview of how many requests and what is the success index and all. So here also it says this will be deprecated. You can use artillery cloud, that is the recommended way. So you can just log into the artillery cloud and get an API key. So I will run a simple test, and to run the load test, what all settings, I mean how you are going to run the test. So these are the API keys. You will get an API key from here, and you just need to run this simple command. Okay, your YML record with your API key. That's it, and artillery cloud will collect all the statics for you, and you should be able to visualize them. So I have created API test.yml file, and we will test it against it. So let's run our test, and I have also exposed my API key. So it will run all these phases. So all the what it is doing, it is just going to push the final result to the cloud. So here I can see the results are popping up, API test.yml, and the results will start publishing here. It will start getting the data, getting the metrics, getting all the virtual users getting created. So this is how you will read this report. I mean these were tolerated, these were satisfied. Okay, and the overall score is 51 because 67,000 is way too much. So maybe something happened. We can rerun this test and try to identify. Here you can see the tolerated requests are 67, satisfied ones are these, frustrated are these. I mean ideally this can be a better report. I will try to rerun this and will try to show you again. And this was our second run, and I think these tests are still better than the previous one. I can see the appends, and here you can see tolerated and satisfied. And you can also compare the requests, I think, comparison view, API test. So this is the previous one and this is the new one. I mean, I don't like this 51 and 78. So you need to run more and more to get the benchmarking, because it is still not satisfied. In my first run, the overall score was around 96. You might be surprised, but that it was. But now my runs, I don't know, something wrong with the system. So we should always test with a stable and a good system. I mean, I'm already running on the Mac M1 with a with 8 16 GB RAM. This is how you can test your APIs. Okay, how can they perform on production when there are millions of users are hitting the request. Okay, so this is overall how you can do the load testing using Artillery, and you can use the Artillery cloud to visualize your statics.